So let's look at this sucker right here. I want to hear what you think of whenever you come up here and you're going to cut that down. So obviously you would never do anything below where this split is, right?
No, I think he probably will. He'll probably come in here and saw it straight down that split and cut it apart way down here, down lower than that. See, you gain almost 2 foot by doing that. See, if it's good, and the person will look at this and think it's probably not good because of that split, but that split have to be pretty doggone tough to hold all that up from falling completely apart. So.
That's a heck of a deal right there. Hey, it's Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and I'm out here at Paul Case Farms today. And this is Paul Case, coincidentally. So this is my first time meeting Paul in person, but Billy, who's a regular on the channel, told me a while back, you've got to meet Paul. He's got a YouTube channel. He does everything that I do, except on larger scale. And he said, Paul's a great storyteller, and he'll give you the shirt off his back. And before I embarrass him, I want to tell you real quick, we've never met before, and he messaged and offered to loan me his truck whenever mine broke down. So I guess Billy wasn't telling a lie. So, you want to tell him a little bit what you do around here?
If you call me, you'll probably have to get in line behind Brock to borrow my pickup. There.
Yep, so don't call him for a truck. But other than that, I've just been walking around a little bit. They run a pretty serious sawmill operation from my point of view, and we're just going to take a look at all their equipment and show you what they do around here.
Yeah, we sawmill. We have a wood mizer sawmill. It's not new, but it's very functional. Runs on 3-phase electric. We also do firewood. Have a Halverson HWP, I guess, 120. And we have a small logging operation as well as beef cattle. And you can sure enough go to my channel and check out all kinds of videos on that. Probably won't be nearly as professionally done as this one because just about all mine goes through this phone that's in my pocket. Yeah. And I've been doing this for about 3 years. And I've got almost 400 subscribers, so yeah, it's really, you can tell by the number of subscribers that my channel is right up there amongst the big ones.
Well, some guys are about the show and some guys are about the job. I have a feeling Paul's more about the job.
We've been on the go. You can tell it in a lot of my videos that we go a lot.
So first thing, a lot of you guys enjoyed seeing my Quonset hut go up. Well, he's got one here, so we're gonna go take a look at it.
All right, let's go.
Paul and his family have a lot of acreage out here, and we drove around quite a bit of it. And everywhere I looked, there was a pond or a tractor or some other piece of machinery that I could have spent the whole day looking at. So hopefully we're going to have him in a few more videos. And Paul's the real deal. So I'd love it if a few hundred of you guys would go over there and subscribe to his channel and tell him I said hi. I've been trying to keep my videos on the shorter side, but Paul had a lot of good information he shared with me today, and I've been wanting someone to teach me a little bit about cutting down trees, so I decided to share all that with you guys as well.
This is the Quonset hut that my dad and I built in probably '98. We did it in the winter. The most we could get put up in one day was 5 of those arches, and we didn't do the foundation like they said. They wanted you to build it up 12 inches up off the ground and then put a notch in it. And we just dug a footing ditch and then made forms for our notch inside of that. So those pieces go down into the ground a little bit.
So I'm not the only one who looks at the instructions and then interprets them how I feel
I can do better than that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, but we did bury steel in our footing, and then it's got chains ever so often. Some of them actually come out of the concrete to where you can see. But then we went back over and filled up with concrete. And it's got the bolts in the metal would hold it together as long as your concrete don't break off. And they said we needed to seal it, where we'd put that on the outside. Because we get water in it and bust the footing off. We haven't had any of that. we were on to do it on the cheap. You know, that concrete a foot tall out of the ground is going to cost more than it will just in the ditch. So, and we picked a pretty level spot to where we didn't have to do a lot of leveling to get our concrete down in the ditch all just right. But the first ring on our building we tore up pretty bad, and when we got it up, we had high winds that night, so we had like a backhoe and 2 tractors and something else here with that thing tied down to it while it was standing up. And their instructions said you could put that whole ring together on the ground and then use 2 ropes and a guy to pull it up. And I don't know what guy they used to pull that up with, where they determined them instructions was like that, but we couldn't do it that way. It took 2 of us on the scaffolding to try to pull it up, and we almost pulled what we had for scaffolding over. But we did get the first one up that way, and we decided we'd do the rest of them in halves, and that worked out very well. But they also said in the book on this one to just put every 7th bolt in until you get it all put up, and then go back and put all the bolts in. We didn't do that either, because we figured out you're going to have multiple people crawling all over it to be able to get all the bolts put back in it. So when we put it together, they were tight. And one of the things they said that you could adjust for was to make sure that your arch was straight by running a string and a plumb off the top of it. And so we checked that here, and we checked it a couple times going down through there, and it never got off more than 1/4 of an inch. Yep. And that's good enough for a guy who makes his footing all in the ditch. But that's the reason it looks like there's a ladder across this end. The pieces did this on us, and they actually shipped us enough of those little angle iron pieces to make like 5 runs all the way the length of the building. And I told my dad I was afraid that if we ever had snow load, that'd hold snow on it, and I didn't want that. And he said we can use those to straighten that back out. So that's why they're on there. A very good friend of mine made fun of me right after we put it up. He said, I can see how you can climb up there, but how do you climb down, you know?
I tell you, I had the exact same thought. They said you have to leave all those bolts loose and then just climb across the top. I don't know who they're friends with, but there's no way you can't lean a ladder on it, and I mean, it'd be a nightmare trying to put those in after.
We actually used a semi van trailer in the middle of it for scaffolding, and so we had to move it once because it was only 40 foot long. And we found that a 55-gallon barrel sitting on top of that was the perfect height to set the middle on. And so you just scoot that back and forth wherever the middle of the next one was. The way you stagger them, it's never in the same place. And that worked really good. My dad did about all the work on the top of the semi, and we did just about all the rest of it from the loader bucket on my backhoe. One guy could get the bolt stuck through, and another one, we used vice grips. All of this one was square nuts, and so you could hook a pair of vice grips on them real easy, and when you stuck that bolt through, we was using a 3/8 drill to run them, a corded drill. Yeah, that was high-tech back in '98, and that was how all of them got tightened.
If you guys were doing 5 a day with 2 people, you were moving better than us.
No, it was 3 of us. Okay. It was almost always 3 of us. They would work on getting what they could reach put together, and I was working on putting the next ring together on the ground. You had, was there always 3 pieces? 3 pieces and a short one on every one of them.
I feel a little bit better that I'm not the only one who fought with one of these. Now let's check out the sawmill, which they run 6 hours a day, pretty much every day, I think.
The maximum cut width is 28 inches, but you're supposed to be able to cut a 3-foot diameter log. But if you're going to cut a 3-foot diameter log, you have to let the backstops down and scoot it way over that way, and you have to trim all 4 sides, and then sometimes you'd have to hold one up at a 45 degree and cut the edge off from it so you can cut that side down farther.
So I'm looking at getting a small mill as kind of like a hobby thing. And my question is, do I want it under a roof? Or is it better to have it out in the open where you can clean out from under it?
Well, that is an issue. But this thing versus a smaller mill, like what you're talking about, you can probably set that up on something sturdy enough to where you can pick the whole thing up and move it and then clean it out and put it back.
Because I thought about putting it in my Quonset hut to keep it protected.
Yeah, that's what I used to do on the one that I had. There's some other keys that you'll want to figure out I can help you with. My mill, I set it on the ground to start with. It wasn't very long till I cut me some 8x8s and set it on 8x8s to try to get the rails of it up to where there's about knee high. Because you're going to be taking and reaching down to clamp log or boards, and you're going to be setting boards up on that to cut the edges on them and things like that. And being a little bit higher saves your back a whole bunch. If you can get it up to where the rails that the head slides on are about knee high, it really makes it a lot easier. The one I had actually loaded from the same side that it blew the sawdust out of. And you'd think that's not ideal, but it is, because that thing would spit out a whole bunch more sawdust. Eventually you'd have to clean out from underneath the middle of it, but I'd clean that outside for 5 or 6 times before the inside got built up. So if you put it in your mill or in your building and you can't get to one side of it, you're going to be moving a lot more often to be able to clean that sawdust out.
Yep, that'll be a logistical thing, thinking about where the sawdust has to be cleaned. Am I going to move it in and out sometimes? Do I turn it long way or cross way? So it'd be easier to just stick it out in the rain, but that's not as good for your mill. So,
well, the building he's going to working on building is going to have a 14-foot door here, and then a 20-foot door and another 14-foot door past that, so he'll actually have one more stack of stuff behind what he's going to have here. But he's also going to move the edger that you see down there, is the machine we run these boards through. He's going to have it set up right behind this mill in that new building so that he can run stuff on the edger every day.
The mill that you're seeing here is it's older now. You got, what, did you say 6,000 hours on this?
Yeah. Are we at 6,000 hours on the mill yet?
Yeah.
Almost 6,000 hours. It'll be there in a month.
Which is pretty wild. But if you wanted to buy this exact mill, you're looking at like $50,000-$60,000, aren't you? New?
Yeah, it's I mean, pretty expensive.
Because it's got the hydraulic turners is a big part of that.
But this mill was used when I got it, had 300 and some hours on it, and we gave 30 for it.
Yeah, I'm not looking to start in that kind of price range, but I'd love to be able to cut a little bit of lumber.
About that.
That's a heck of a deal right there.
All my controls in here are electric from that. You just have to have the auxiliary on. So I have to hold this on, and they did have 2 handfuls of controls, and I've cheapened it up. All of their buttons wore out. They were little micro switches, and it didn't take very long for them to give up. Yeah. I've been doing this 3 years. I think last year I cut or processed with this attachment 150, 160 loads of 2 grip piece on my truck. And the 2 years before, I'd probably only done about that much of it together.
Well, I tell you, that's better than any way I've ever cut firewood.
I've never cut it with just my fingertips.
Yeah. What you see right here is the before picture of the wooded area, and now we're going to show you the after. This would be a good point in the video for my tree hugging friends to just shut it off now, because you have any comments about deforestation or destroying the planet, I don't have time to read them. So I'm not for wasteful cutting, but if you got a purpose, then that's more important than the trees. The trees will grow back, and just needing the lumber is a pretty good reason for me. But in this case, Paul is clearing this for pasture for his cattle, and he's getting the extra benefit of using just about everything he cuts. And that's a resource we need, and cattle need a place to graze. This clearing that you see represents years of hard work for a two-man crew. Now, as we were driving through it, he was telling me stories about some of the work they did out here, but the audio wasn't good enough to use. After they were done cutting the first section, they just rolled out bales of hay, and now they've got pretty good grass coming up through there that could be grazed already. And here's another nice little farm pond, and I don't know how a guy manages all this acreage. That's all I can do to handle 20.
This is a pond soil conservation agency, and back in the day they would dig you a pond as long as you did it by their specs. And their ponds had to be 10 foot deep. They said they had an inspector. I know one of the guys that does some of those for them. Said they had an inspector that would come out with a fishing setup. He'd have a rod and reel and a bobber on it and a weight. If it didn't, when it rained, filled your pond up. If it didn't pull the bobber under, it made you drain it and do it again. So it wasn't deep enough.
Boy, it is nice out here. This is, see, this is the, all these are the right size for that Halverson, is what I see when I'm walking up there.
Well, some of them are. A lot of them are. The ones that we've gone past, we've left because there'll be some saw logs in them. There may be one or two in that little clump that we'll eventually take.
That's what.
But there'll be some saw logs in them, and these little pieces here are going home with me. So when we go to taking stuff for the Halverson, we go all the way down to 4 or 5 inches.
And isn't it max is 10 or something? 10, 12 inches?
No, it's bigger than that. I think they say it's 14. The trouble you get into is if it's going to be that size that they say is max, the log's got to be perfect, because it won't pass that arm sticking up. But you can roll it off from there and shimmy it over and make it work. But it's mine just does a lot better with 8 and 10 inch stuff, and you can really whittle through a lot of it without having to play with the other and jerk around with it.
So I was debating if that Halverson's would be more useful for me or that inverted splitter, and I said I just don't have smaller material like that on my property. So
the stuff that you could deal with your splitter, upside down splitter, is the kind of crap I wish I had one of those for. This was Kevin's working today. They're down all over in here. I bet he's got me. I didn't show it to you in my building over there.
look at that guy.
Praying mantis.
Right up me while I'm walking.
I wouldn't let him get to your beard.
That caught me off guard. I was like, I got something stuck on my leg. So he cut a lot of this today then?
Yep. Well, all of it. I had it cleaned up last week.
Oh.
And you always have that. You always have one that hangs up in another one. We'll either have to cut the other two down or cut them loose and push them with the loader or whatever.
Now,
I want to show you though, I can do it on this stump right here, his way of doing it. He figures out what way the tree's gonna fall. The tree's missing already from this one, but I can show you. And so he comes in here, he don't ever cut a very big notch. This was his notch.
mm-hmm.
And then he plunge cuts, and he'll stick his saw in back here and cut across. And then he comes this way, and he always leaves an inch or so. And he's cut it all the way to here. You can see even that was cut. And this is the inch.
Mm-hmm.
And then he cuts out the back. And if it's got enough lean to it, it'll fall.
And that's kind of my favorite way to cut on, especially if I think it's hollow. Now I've had 10 videos where I said, I think this might be hollow. I'm going to do a bore cut first and then cut towards the back. And none of those were. And then the one that was hollow you saw, I didn't do it that way.
Yep.
But that you guys are cutting it that low for 2 reasons. You don't want the stump, but also you get
we want all the wood.
More usable wood. That's what I know. The loggers are going to find whatever way they need to get the whole log.
You can see he's done the same thing on that one. It would have fell that way. He never cuts a notch that's much deeper than the thickness or width of his chainsaw blade.
Part of the reason I overcomplicate it a lot of times is if you have a certain way you need it to go. But
yep, we do that some in the woods. Like you can kind of pick a few of them out. Look at this tree right here. You can see obviously it's gonna want to go that way, but you'd want to fall it in the open. And so you can notch them this way a little more and kind of make him fall and maybe miss that. But what we would do is right before he cut or clipped the last bit of it, I'd get the loader and push on it. It's about 8 foot off the ground and just stick the fork in the bark. And on these small ones, they're not a problem. Then you get into one that's bigger. I don't see one here.
So almost everything I've cut in the last year was 3 foot diameter.
Yeah, when you get into ones like that old fork tree over there, you're gonna have other issues. Now, that's not the way I usually do it. Most of what I have cut wasn't for firewood. I've cut a lot of firewood stuff, but most of what I'd cut would be for a log. And here's the kicker on log. You don't want to leave that crap on the butt of the log. And you don't want to give it an opportunity to split. And if you got that much holding wood on it, it's a big opportunity to split, especially if it's got any lean to it like this one. And so what I would do is I'd cut the same notch just about as deep as what my saw blade is wide. And then I would take my saw, and let's just say this was the one I'd done. I'd take my saw and I'd stick it in here and whittle this out to where they'd only be a spot here and a spot here that was holding it. And then I'd start cutting them from the back, and when you get into that place where it's voided, it'll just fall right over. And the reason for that is you don't want to give it an opportunity to split with too much holding wood, but you also don't want to pull long fibers out. Oak, at least red oak and post oak, is not as bad about doing that as walnut. But boy, you'll screw up a high-dollar walnut log by not getting that all cut out of there.
If you let it fall with a 2 or 3 inch hinge, then that holding wood might damage the first 2 foot or more of your...
I've seen it bust them 8 foot long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it, like I say, on firewood, it don't make any difference. But I found out firewood's good practice for cutting the real thing. You can get comfortable doing stuff that if you mess it up real bad, it ain't gonna hurt a lot. But that's kind of the way I do it. There's nothing wrong with the way Kevin does it. But if I was cutting them for logs, I would make sure that I had most of that. And there's another thing. They say that sapwood won't pull fibers like the heartwood will. And usually, if you get away from the part of that, it don't do it as bad anyway. But I have split a walnut log before that would have been worth something and made it worth almost nothing.
Now, when you look around out here, 90% of this is going to go eventually.
Yeah, or more.
And you're
I'm thinking it'll be pretty much cleared unless we find one big old wolf tree that we don't even see that there's going to be anything useful in it at all.
Is it random, or is there a story why we've cut out here but left a lot of those?
Yeah, there's a story. We're waiting on anything that'll log to make saw logs for whenever Scott buys a mill from me.
So you're not wanting to cut them all this month.
No.
You're taking... Okay,
yeah,
so you'll let these grow a little till you're ready for them.
I think it's going to be the first week in October he's planning on doing that. And after that, we'll be cutting the... And I wanted to have this pretty cleared out around a bunch of them to where we cut a whole bunch of saw logs pretty quick. And those saw logs pile up and make truckloads pretty quick, especially when they're good and got any size to them. You lay this tree on the ground, there's going to be 2 or 3 pieces out of it, you know. And a lot of these down here is pretty nice. That tree right there, even, that's got the big fork. Kevin and I was looking at it the other day. There'll be 3 or 4 pieces out of it that'll make saw logs, and then several pieces of firewood in the top. This one right here, it would make 3 or 4 pieces if it didn't have that big fork in the top of it.
Now, whenever I cut down a tree, I'm looking for the big section that doesn't have limbs. But I mean, when it has a big limb coming out of it, is it pretty much, you're not going to get any lumber out of that part, right?
It doesn't bother us as bad on that pallet wood. They don't grade it at all. It's just got to be solid. It's up to them to drive the nails through those hard knots.
Yep.
Yep, that's how that works.
And here you got a Bobcat S300.
Yep, that's Bob 3.0.
I'd say this guy, just looking at it, I'd say this has a few hours on it.
You'd probably be surprised. 5,500. Let me get in and look. It's a Kubota
engine.
Yep. I haven't had this one all that long. Less than a year. 5418. How many hours it's got? I never haul one log. Unless they're like that one behind my mom and dad's house. Whenever we go to loading them, it's kind of a headache if you get more than whatever will lay on those forks flat, but usually 2 or 3 or 4. I carry them to the truck and dump them in it. I have a little 1-ton dump truck, the same one I deliver firewood on, that we'll bring in here, and we load it with these logs. And that's how we quantify our firewood logs. That's our measure. See, on saw logs, you quantify them by the size of them according to the Doyle scale. You ever heard of Doyle?
Tells you how many
scale?
board feet you get out of it based on the dimensions.
And that's how we do all the saw logs. I know some people around here went to weighing them on a like a tractor trailer scale, but we scale all ours with a stick. And he's got a bunch of them down here. I don't think he showed up till 7:30 this morning, and I know he left before noon.
Yeah, I need to get
all them.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive if he cut all this in a day.
Yeah, he cut all this morning.
I want to get out here while you're cutting.
Well, we need to.
Because
this thing, I haven't had them solid tires on it very long. I bought them kind of wore out like that. It had foam filled ones, and we had one of them. I had a big hole come in the tire, and then it puked half the foam out of it after about 2 months of having that big hole, and so we had to switch and do something different. I don't know.
Definitely seems like airless is a good option out here. I bet those are more expensive, probably, aren't they?
I get $400 for that set, but they're pretty wore out. The guy told me that if I went to having troubles with not enough traction, I needed to buy me a set of them over the wheel tracks, and I can see how that could help. But those do ride a little rougher, even than the foam filled one, and they're heavy. You don't want to have to pick one of them up and think you're going to put it in the back of a pickup. We hauled that to the shop and used the other skid loader to unstack the wheels and stand them up so we could roll them to the machine. And if I remember right, I got in the machine, we had it blocked up on the back and bucket on the front of it, pushed down to lift the wheels off the ground, and Scott maneuvered them around and got them on there one at a time. Yeah. There are some trees that don't make no good firewood, and sycamore's one of them. Elm don't make very good firewood, but if they're small enough elm, we can work with them on the Halverson. But that sycamore, you just can't get it to bust on that Halverson. So
You got one big one here that's grown into, grown together.
Look at that with a chainsaw in your hand and say, what in the heck am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah. So will you just leave this here?
Nope. That one there's the one I was just telling you about that had several logs in it. That side over there above the double's got 2 in it at least, maybe 3. The dead part is no good for nothing but firewood. But these 2 over here have got a couple of pieces in them. And then I think, I'll be surprised if Kevin don't take and split that down to the ground and cut that off way down here. And each one of these pieces will have a 8-foot piece in it. But that does get a little hairier. That one over there, not so much, but this one, what way is it really gonna go? Somewhere off over in here.
Seems like with doing that one, it'd be nice to have a lot of the other stuff out of the way.
Yep, it'll be all gone before we cut it down. But
now what kind of tree is that?
That's probably a black oak, but a red oak. In the red oak family.
So let's look at this sucker right here. I want to hear what you think of whenever you come up here and you're going to cut that down. So obviously you would never do anything below where this split is, right?
No, I think he probably will. He'll probably come in here and saw it straight down that split and cut it apart way down here, down lower than that. See, you gain almost 2 foot by doing that. See if it's good. And the person will look at this and think it's probably not good because of that split. But that split have to be pretty doggone tough to hold all that up from falling completely apart. So
see, when I come up to something like this, it's huge and it's split, I'm thinking, what do I understand about what part is going to do what? And I don't know what's happening down here, how it's held together and what it's going to do. So I would try to cut it up here and, you know, notch it over here and cut, plunge cut here and then cut back. But you think he'll cut the whole thing down?
We actually did one not much different than this, except the pieces were way bigger on the ground next door back in the spring. And he uses a 462 just like my saw, 24-inch bar. And he got the cross on it went way up to here. And he cut down here, went to the other side and cut down, and then he cut his notch. And then he plunge cut it and got on, and he run out of gas before he ever got one piece of it on the ground.
That's a lot of cutting.
He had a lot of cutting in it and never even had one piece on the ground.
I'd love to be here and watch this one come down when it gets to it.
Okay.
Because that, to me, I like watching someone who's good at what they do. And I don't care what they're doing. If it's concrete or building a house, if you're good at what you do, I enjoy that.
Kevin's pretty good at what he does. I know that there was a guy that come in here and logged it, and he left this one standing, I bet you. When I was just out of high school, may have still been in high school, I had built a gooseneck flatbed trailer, and he borrowed my trailer, the guy that was logging here. And there's a real interesting tree we should go right over there and look at. You need to get it on camera. Yeah. And what's happened, I can tell you what happened, but it'll be cooler for you to see it as we're looking at it and me tell you what happened.
Let's do it.
But we can show you that tree coming down when it happens.
Because this is similar to that one I did. This is a little bit bigger, but pretty similar really. And I didn't know what the heck to do. When I decide to do it, I just go do it, you know.
That what is it that's going to keep it held together is the issue. You don't know. And the 24-inch bar ain't going to reach through that.
Experience makes you better at guessing.
The saw. yeah, but most good experience comes from bad judgment. You know. So
why do you run? I mean, so those saws will flat rip on a shorter bar, but you don't ever run a bigger bar for something like this? Or?
I wouldn't in the woods. We just don't encounter stuff that's 4 foot.
And you don't want to sit there and change bars all the time. But for me,
when you dull it, you're going to sharpen almost as many teeth on the longer saw bar. I've got one. We use a 3-foot bar on my 660 at Sawmill, but simply to cut off the end of some bundles that we have to cut off. They have to be a certain length.
Yeah. Because to me, though, it'd be much harder if you have to find your cut from the other side with the shorter bar on that.
Well, you kind of leave it finding your cut for you, you know, and you'll get in there most of the way and figure out, hey, I'm there.
Maybe I'll see it instead of asking.
You could cut that limb off from that tree right there, and it'll be 28 or 29 years old.
Yeah.
And that'll be when that logger was in here, and what he done is he fell a tree over this. Matter of fact, when we was looking, we found the stump. Right there. See it under the top of that tree back there?
Yeah.
It was probably that tree. And he fell it, and it hit the top of this tree and broke it over. And then it grew a new shoot out the side of it. Chances are it was bent over like that and held down by part of the top of that tree until it rotted away or something. Yeah. I told Kevin, I said, that's a real fine tree. He said, yep. And then he mentioned the guy's name we sell firewood to. If you send him a lot of crooked logs, it takes up more space on the trailer. Okay.
No one would ever do that on purpose, but if it happens.
No, but he's going to get the ones that are more crooked. And he looks at me sometimes like, I think if you roll that one over, we get 3 more beside it, you know. And I'm like, yeah, but I should work harder to make it cheaper, I guess.
Yeah. I tell you what, as we walk around here, I feel like I could make about 10 more videos. Everywhere I look, there's a piece of equipment that I'm interested in, or he's told me more stories than I can remember already. So we're going to try to get you on this podcast with us.
We should do that. We'll have to schedule it for a time when I'm not at church.
Right.
Because here one Sunday I would have been gone.
Yeah, we can definitely work around your schedule and try to make that happen.
Plus, we didn't get to look at any of my tractors.
Yeah, he's got so much equipment around here, I could stay all day. But anyway, I appreciate you letting me borrow your truck. I appreciate you taking time to walk me around.
Yep.
I appreciate you guys for watching. I'll put links on the screen to more of our videos, and we'll see you next time.